You might notice that these rules for user friends look similar to the rules that we wrote for the users themselves. I could essentially copy the user validation rules for a user object stored here and paste them for the user validation rules for a user object stored in the users node. But copying and pasting this user structure throughout my rules kind of makes me cringe a bit. And it also makes the rules a lot harder to maintain when I want to change one thing. So I did a little bit of research on how to simplify my rules, and on the Firebase and rule security page, they suggest the Bolt compiler. The Bolt compiler is a officially supported, high-level modeling and security language that compiles to Firebase JSON rules. And Bolt's pretty cool because it allows you to abstract out some of this repetitive validation code, among other features. Now, before you dive into the Bolt quick start, it should be noted that using Bolt is completely optional. Also, you should have a firm grasp of the rules language itself before diving too far into Bolt. The compiler is self-described as a bit experimental, meaning that it is relatively young and actively being worked on. So there are still a few kinks and things might change. With those caveats, let's take a look at how you'd write the rules that you just wrote, but using Bolt. To start, you'll need to set Bolt up. Now, if everything goes smoothly, this should only take a few minutes, and involves first downloading NPM. NPM stands for Node Package Manager, and is a JavaScript package manager. Bolt is written in JavaScript, hence the need for NPM. Once you have NPM, you can install Bolt. I provided the instructions in the instructor notes, so take a moment now and install Bolt. Once you have Bolt installed, you can write a rules.bolt file, and in the directory with your rules.bolt file, you can then run the following in a terminal. This will convert the Bolt file into a JSON rules file, which you can then copy over manually into Firebase. So, let's see what a Bolt file for user friends might look like. Remember that Bolt is a modeling language. This means that it allows you to write typed models for your Firebase object, and then it generates all the necessary validation code. We have a user type, a timestamp type, and an encoded email type. This allows you to abstract out all the qualities of a user or timestamp into one place. These objects here can contain property keys, and you can specify the type of each of these properties. This encoded email type extends a string, which means that everything that's an encoded email will also be a string. But there's an additional validation that the string has to have the format of an email address. And we can see up here that this property email is using this type encoded email. Now this is all well and good, but it isn't saying where in our rules to use these types. To do that, you have to use something that Bolt calls paths. Now, instead of forcing you to write out the nested JSON structure, you write paths and then specify the rules within the path. You can also say the value at the location that is referenced by the path is of one of the types that you defined above, using is and then the type that it is. So here, we're specifying that whatever is stored at the path user friends, user encoded email, friend encoded email is a user object. And then in turn, we say what's stored at users and then user encoded email is also a user object. So the validation for these two things is going to look exactly the same. And then once you've got your Bolt file, you can save it and then run this command that I showed you before, which then in turn generates a JSON file, which should look pretty darn similar to the JSON file that we just made. And that was with very minimal to no copy and paste.